Hi everybody. Thank you so much, PyCon Colombia, for having me and for attending my keynote talk. I'm really honored to be here to be giving this keynote speech today. My name is Mariatta, and I'm one of the Python core developers. So basically, I'm one of the maintainers of the Python programming language. And I currently work at Google as Senior Developer Relations Engineer. I live in Vancouver, Canada, and you can find me on GitHub or Twitter as Mariatta. And so if you ever contributed to Python or if you want to contribute to Python, you will likely be interacting with one of our bots. And we actually have quite a number of them. So each of these bots have their own purpose and they do different things. So one of my main focus area in the core Python team is maintaining these bots and ensuring that they're functional. So I'm personally most proud with these bots, especially with the Miss Islington bot. So this bot actually creates pull request in the CPython repo, and she also merged the pull request. So the Python core developers and contributors have all came to rely on these bots. And I'm really proud to be able to contribute to Python this way by creating useful bots that helps with contributor experience. Because actually some point in my life before all of this, before like back when I was a nobody, I once applied for a job and the job interview was like basically it's a programming challenge and the challenge is like ask me to build a bot and like I didn't know how to do it at that time. Like I couldn't do it at that time. I've never even seen a bot. I don't know what's a bot. I didn't know how it worked. Like the whole concept of build a bot just sounded intimidating. So at that time, I felt like I knew how to draw a circle, and yet they're asking me to build the Eiffel Tower. It felt so intimidating, and I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know that this is the things we do in job interviews. So I felt like a failure. Like I felt stupid, embarrassed. Like I shouldn't have tried. I shouldn't have applied for this job. So I didn't get that job, and I've never heard back from them ever again, even now. Still, at that time, I wanted to improve my career. So back then, I've also started to participate in open source projects. I joined different communities, and then I noticed that people are using bots in the open source communities. For example, when I contributed to Python the first time, as soon as I made a pull request, a bot responded to me right away. Like somehow it knew that, well, I have not signed the CLA, which is required for contributing to Python. So the bot automatically tells me that it tells me what I need to do and it applies a label to GitHub. And then I joined a different open source community, the Koala project, and they use bots too. They use bots on GitHub, GitLab, and on Gitter, which is the chatting platform. So Gitter is like Slack or Discord. And this was an interesting experience to me. Like immediately when I joined the channel, I saw the maintainers there. They talk to the bots. Instead of talking to me directly, they talk to the bot and make the bot do things. They talk to the bot talks back. So I was impressed. I've never seen this kind of things before at that time. So when I start seeing, projects using bots, they make it seem so easy. So I started thinking, okay, maybe it's not that hard. Maybe it's not that difficult. So I just became curious. Then I wanted to learn about how to build bots. Like I wanted to redeem myself from my own failures. So I figured out these bots are actually written in Python and open source. So I can see the code. So I can learn. And because it's open source, not only that I got the opportunity to read and learn about how these bots are written, but then I get to contribute and help improve the bots. So that's what I did. I started contributing. I learned. I've gained lots of experience in building bots. So I thought I'll share what I know about bots. Um, I've shared what I've learned along the way. Let's start with what even is a bot. So a bot is really just a web application. It's a kind of web application that it can run on its own. It can perform things on its own. So a bot is a form of automation. So let's look at this. Let's understand what's happening here. there's a bot here. The Knights Who Says Me is a bot. How does this work? So it actually just seems to be waiting there, waiting until somebody open a PR. Then it can automatically post a comment on GitHub, automatically apply a label on GitHub. But this is GitHub. Like the PR, the comment, the label, these are all things on GitHub. But it seems like the Python organization has a data of who have signed the CLA or not. So there must be a kind of database somewhere. So is this database on GitHub or is it owned by the PSF? Like how is it possible to have a custom app like this, custom logic specific to Python, custom database, but on GitHub? And it's the same thing here, right? They have a bot on Gitter. So the bot just waits until somebody gives it the comment. And then the bot can comment right back. How does this work? Is this bot written on Gitter? Does Gitter write this bot, or is it maintained by the Koala team? So how could these bots actually do these things on platform, like third-party platform like Gitter or GitHub? How is it possible to have custom logic that interacts with third-party services like that? How can these things talk together? So all of these are actually possible because there's an API for all of this. API is what allows those different systems to talk to each other. So platforms and services like GitHub, Gitter, third-party apps like that, they provide APIs to allow you to build your own applications. So you can make API calls that let you perform automated actions. So if you want to automatically create a pull request on GitHub, there's an API for that. And you want to automatically post a message on Gitter, Slack, or Discord, there's an API for that. So now you know you can make API calls to third-party apps. But what about the other way around? Like what if you want the third-party app to talk to you? Say you want GitHub to tell you or to notify you that, hey, there's a new PR, or you want Gitter or Slack to tell you that, hey, somebody just joined a channel or somebody just posted a message and you might want to do something about it. They can totally talk to your app this way. They can tell you about things that happen on that platform, and these things are called webhook events. So these third-party apps can make requests over the internet to your app using webhooks. So webhooks are basically APIs. So you gotta think about webhooks as incoming APIs from third-party apps to your own web app. So now you have a web app, it can accept webhook events from external apps, and then your own app can automatically respond by making API calls. So now you got a bot. Now we know that all of these are built with APIs. So let's learn about how to work with APIs. The first thing you want to do is to read the documentation. But even I struggle with this myself. The word documentation is a small word, but it means big, right? Like as a newbie, I was kind of lost when presented with any kind of documentation. Like I didn't always know how to navigate the docs or how to even find the information I need. Because there are actually different types of documentation. There are tutorials, there's the reference docs, there's like how-tos, there's just different kind of documentation. And so usually there will be documentation about APIs and then also documentation about the actual products. How would users normally use the products? So I found that documentation about APIs would usually be listed under their developer documentation. So if you go to the website, you go to the footer or the banner, you will look for developers because that's where you will be developing and building apps using their APIs. So now if you're completely so new to this, I definitely recommend that you look for tutorials which will guide you on how to build apps, how to build things with their APIs from start to finish. The thing is, API providers don't always provide the tutorials for you. So you might have to look for tutorials elsewhere. You might have to Google it. Maybe somebody else have written a blog post or video tutorial. So you might have to look elsewhere. Though it would be great if API providers write their own tutorials, right? And once you have taken the tutorial and then now you're ready to start using APIs, you want to start exploring the other parts of documentation. So you will want to know that what are available API endpoints that you can call. So they would usually list these endpoints under resources documentation. Now, the next steps you want to do after reading the documentation, you're ready to try things out and build something, you need to learn about authentication. So when you make API calls to the third-party libraries, they will normally want to know who's calling their API. They want to know who you are so that they can provide you with the necessary access. So API authentications can come in a few forms. API keys or API token or OAuth would be the most common, OAuth 2. The other kind of authentication would be by passing in your username and password. So, but I don't recommend that you do this. Choose either API keys or OAuth 2. And their documentation will tell you how to obtain the authentication token. So once you have the tokens, credentials, you should keep it secret. Don't share it with anyone. And if you must save it, use some kind of encryption instead of storing it in plain text. So don't include it as part of your core base. I know I have accidentally committed my authentication a few times. Don't do that. So the best way to store the secrets is that you store them as environment variables. So your code will simply just try to retrieve it from the environment variable. Now you read the docs, you get the token, and you want to actually start coding and build something. But there's one more thing you need to look into before starting to build with APIs. You should find out if there is any client library for the API that you want to use. So client libraries are basically helper library for working with third-party APIs. And I know this might sound confusing, but I found that each API provider, they're calling this differently. Sometimes they call it library, sometimes they call it toolkit or SDKs or wrappers. So different names, but the purpose is the same. The client library is to provide abstraction and simplify. So client libraries can help hide the lower level details like handling request headers and authorization and signature verification. And so instead of dealing with HTTP requests or headers, you will actually write code and implement logic in your own favorite programming language, like in Python. Now, they don't always provide client libraries for you. The API providers don't always have it. Sometimes they simply provide you the endpoint and you need to write your own in your own programming language. And I think it's fine. It means it's an opportunity for you. Like maybe you can create your own open source client library for the API that you like to use so that you can become an open source maintainer. That's my story. That's how I became open source maintainer. Also, sometimes even if they don't have the client library, they have APIs. They might have the open API specification. So in that case, you can use Swagger client to use their API. Now about webhooks, so webhooks are basically incoming API requests. So because it's a web app, you can actually use any of your favorite web framework to receive incoming API calls. You can use Django REST framework, you can use Flux or Fast API or AI or HTTP. The thing is, when you receive incoming APIs, you receive webhooks, you want to always verify the incoming request that it is indeed coming from the API that you want, not from somebody who's trying to hack your web server. So check the signature. Sometimes they pass in secrets to you. Verify that. And if you use client libraries, the client library really should handle all this verification for you. If it doesn't, if you find you need to do this yourself, you should file a feature request to the client library. So one of the things I've seen in the developer community is that I've seen people trying to do web scraping using Beautiful Soup as a hobby project. I agree, it's interesting, it's fun project. But I think it's a great library, but I think sometimes you're misusing it. Like a lot of time, the things I've seen people trying to scrape, you can get from APIs. So instead of thinking about, I'm gonna scrape things as the first thing you wanna do, you should ask, is there an API for that? And honestly, I've been asking this to myself a lot in the past few years. Is there an API for the things I need? Turns out, yes, there's an API for that. So let's go through some of them. Let's start with GitHub APIs because GitHub bots is one of the first bots I've seen. So GitHub has pretty good developer documentation. I definitely recommend you reading it and getting familiar with the documentation. It has different ways to authenticate your API calls. You can get personal access token. You can do the OAuth too. And GitHub officially maintains client libraries in Ruby, .NET, and JavaScript, not Python. Therefore, you will find different third-party Python libraries for GitHub, made not by GitHub, but made by other open source maintainers. So the GitHub library is what I use, is what we use to build CPython's GitHub bots. It's actually the project started by Brad Cannon, who is also a Python core developer. I've been using the library, I contribute to GitHub, and now I'm the co-maintainer of GitHub because I contribute so many times. Um, and when I started, there was no tutorial on how to use Python to build GitHub bots, so I ended up writing my own tutorial. So if you're interested, that's the link. So I'll just show a little bit of code snippets on how you would be using GitHub to create an issue on GitHub. It's actually just one line like this. In this code, you see that I'm making a post API request to GitHub using GitHub. I pass in the issue title, issue body. That's it. That's the code. And GitHub also has built-in functionality for handling webhook events from GitHub in order for you to build a bot. So it also verifies incoming signatures under the hood, so you don't have to worry about it. So in this code snippet, the important part is the one where it says router, the decorator where it says router.register. That's where we're telling the bot that I want to listen to the issue open events. So once this event is received, we can decide what to do about it. So in this example, I'm making another API call to GitHub so that the bot can automatically comment on the issue. So this is all it takes to write a bot in Python, a GitHub bot in Python. It's actually less than 100 lines of code. It's not hard. How about Google? Google have APIs? Yeah. Yes, I work at Google, but I found out about this before I even work at Google. So last year, I was organizing a Python language summit, and we wanted to create a slideshow for all of the attendees. We wanted to show everybody's name, GitHub username, their bio, their photo, and I started copy pasting their info from Google Sheets to Google Slides. After 3 slides, I got so frustrated. Like I got so angry. Like this was so boring and tedious. I don't want to do this. Can I automate this somehow? Is there an API for Google Slides? So turns out there's API for Google Slides. So I wrote a script to do this. I'll show it to you now. So in the bottom is my command line, my terminal, where I run my Python code, and at the top is my Google Slides presentation on Google on the cloud. Right now you see it has just one slide, and when I run the program, um, I run my code. That's my script, and you can see that the slides are being generated one by one, like an actual working real presentation slide. So this was so exciting to me. I was impressed that you could do this. I didn't know you could do this. I shared this on Twitter, and turns out a lot of people didn't know about this too. Like some people were asking, what is this magic? It's not magic. There's an API for that. So to learn about Google APIs, you can go to developers.google.com. For the authentication with Google APIs, you'll be using OAuth 2 authentication. And Google officially supported client libraries in 9 programming languages: Go, Java, JavaScript, .NET. I choose whatever fits you, and Python for sure. Choose whichever you like. So I'm showing you a snippet on how you would go about reading from Google Sheets used in Python. Basically, you just need to instantiate the Google Sheets service. You would pass in the spreadsheet ID and the range you want to read. After that, you can read and print all the rows in the Google Sheets. And this is the code for creating a new page on Google Slides. First, you need to instantiate the slide service, pass in the credentials, and then you need to construct a request to Google API as a JSON object. And you'll need to read the documentation of what kind of request you can make. There's a lot, and in here you can see that I'm using the create slide request, and along with all the parameters. And this is another request to Google Slides. Basically, I'm using the insert text. This is what allows me to add text to the slides. So I noticed that, yes, you all, the PyCon Colombia team, you mentioned Slack, and you use Slack as the communication channel, and we use Slack at PyLadies too. So I thought I'll just share how you can get started using Slack APIs. The developer documentation for Slack can be found at api.slack.com. And Slack they call the libraries SDKs, and they officially support Python, Node, and Java. So we're lucky, we got Python library in Slack. And their tutorial is pretty good as well, so I do recommend that you read through them if you're interested in building Slack bots. So once you have the SDK installed and the authentication token, it's actually kind of straightforward. It's in just a few lines, you can start writing bots for posting in the channel. And I know some other open source communities like Koala use Gitter instead of Slack. Gitter has APIs. Though the documentation for Gitter APIs, I found that it kind of assumes some knowledge, some intermediate level. It assumes that you're familiar with REST APIs. There's no tutorials. They only have API reference documentation, and they don't officially maintain their own client libraries, which they call wrapper in their documentation. You'll find it under third-party wrappers. But there is a pretty good wrapper library for Gitter called GitterPy that you can use, and it's kind of straightforward to use as well. Just install the library, get the token from Gitter, and then you can start having bots that can post messages just like this. Another API I've been playing with recently is HackMD. So we use HackMD in Python team, in Python documentation team as well. So when we meet online and we need to write collaborative notes, we use HackMD. I found out recently that HackMD has APIs, but it's still to be new. It's in beta. They have API reference documentation, and you would access the APIs using API key. However, I haven't seen a good Python client library for this, I guess because it's new, but you can still make API calls in Python by using libraries like request or HTTPX. So, and maybe this is an opportunity for one of you to maybe write open source Python client libraries for HackMD. Open source it and become an open source maintainer. So I thought I'll try it. Like I tried myself. This is an example of how you could call HackMD APIs to get a node in HackMD using HTTPX library. You can totally use request library as well. It will look very similar. Basically, you need the API endpoint. You need to pass in the authorization, and then you call the API endpoint. Do you know that there's an API for getting lyrics? Music's Match API lets you do that. So maybe if I hear some cool song and I want to sing along and learn the lyrics, right? I know that you can just Google for lyrics nowadays, but I found those song lyric websites. They have lots of ads, and maybe I don't always want to see those ads. So maybe I want to get the lyrics and not see the ads. Well, you can write some codes to get the lyrics without ads and without scraping the website. There's an API for Music Match, and you can access it using API key And while they don't have Python client library, they have open API specs. So you can use Swagger SDK for that. And since there's no official Python client, I see other people creating their own library. So I found the PyMusic's Match library. It works pretty good. I tried it. So using this library, you only need to write a few lines of code to get song lyrics. So no scraping. It's like, I think if you scrape using Beautiful Soup, you might have to handle, you need to parse the HTML, you need to find the right div and everything. You will write a lot of lines of code if you use something like that. So using API is better. So now that you know how to use APIs, you can totally build integrations that make use of different APIs. You are not limited to only building apps that talks with just one API provider at a time. For example, at PyLadies, we have a bot that works with both GitHub and Slack. So the PyLadies bot actually listens to GitHub events. For example, if somebody shares an event on GitHub, they posted an issue saying, hey, PyLadies, here's an event that you might be interested. We want to share this with other members in Slack. So we have a bot that automatically shares this, automatically posts that event from GitHub to Slack. So in the Python documentation team, we use HackMD to write our monthly meeting notes. So actually right now, one of us would manually have to copy paste the note and then we post it on GitHub, we share it. But copy pasting is so boring. We should write a bot for sharing notes from HackMD. So just for fun, I tried it. I made a little bot that can retrieve meeting notes from HackMD and then post it on Discord, and it works. So, or maybe I want to store all of my favorite song lyrics. I want to have a collection of lyrics in HackMD or something, so I can go through it without looking at ads on some websites. Also, I don't want to copy paste because I'm lazy. It's boring. Copy pasting is boring. I could just write a few lines of code to get the lyrics and save all of them in HackMD. So you can really do a lot of things. You can be creative and make use of APIs for lots of fun and useful things. But APIs can be abused too. So I've seen bots being used to spam others, to cheat. Please don't do this. Like when using APIs, be respectful of others and be responsible with your power. Don't abuse the data you get from APIs, then don't abuse the third-party platform that you rely on. So use APIs responsibly. Thank you so much, PyCon Colombia. It's been an honor to speak with you, and I hope one day I could see you all in person. Thank you so much.